Chapter 8, Air Intake, Operational Maintenance of the Diesel-Electric Locomotive tm55203 38 General. The diesel-electric locomotive has adequate supply for the air ordered to burn the fuel, complete with the fuel charge of the fresh air drawn in each cylinder during each of the cycle that enters the cylinder at the atmospheric pressure of the engine is described as normal, aspirated, non-supercharged. If air is supplied and the pressure greater than the atmospheric pressure maintained until the compression and the begins of the engine said to be the supercharge of the pressure increases the valve from 2 to 14 pounds, forcing the more air into the cylinders. Correspondingly, greater amount of the fuel can be burned in the engine given the size of the cannon due to the more work. 39 Air intake filters. The diesel engine must have a clean air for the efficient operation. Dust and abrasive will be accessible air to the liners, rings, and the other parts after the enters the engine. Where the air intake passes through the air filter to remove the dust and the dirt. Although many times the air filters there are generally made of the finely shredded metal and fine wires screening which kept the coated with their work effectively only on the long as the can pass and clean and air freely to the engine. They must be carefully cleaned and oiled at irregular intervals and described in the maintenance of the portion of the manual. Types of superchargers. Superchargers may be positive displacement blowers, the central figure blowers. They may be mechanically driven in the engine, maybe to the turbine driven. The engineering for the exhaust gases of the engine and later the type of called the turbocharger. The speed of the turbocharger varies for the quality of the exhaust gas, which results in a maximum delivery air intake of the engine. Heavily loaded and needs for most of some blowers that they provided with the additional to the engine forwarding salvaging purposes of such blower operates the same as the blower supercharger. However, the time the compression between begins at the air pressure of the cylinder at the back of the atmospheric pressure. 41. Construction and blowers of the turbocharger. A blower consisting of the part of the 2 or 3 lobe, the rotors rotating in closely fitted housing supplies at a large volume of the air at low pressure. The figure 30 and 31. The housing may be attached to the engine box that may be delivered the air through the manifold. Those large blowers of the type of normally greater driven in engine. Small ones may be driven in each rotor that's pressed and tubular steel in the engine ends in the shaft. There's journals which in turn of the bearings, the blocking the blower and the plate at the end of the other turn and the flange hub, the serrated board, the press of the serrated shafts to provide the rugged structural relationship with the rotors and gears. These hubs serves as the bearing journal. All bearings of the pressure lubricated through the drilled passages, blower of the passage plates of the rotor gears, the lubricated, maintaining the reserved oil which permits the teeth to dip into the oil as they turn. The oil seals are fitted with the end of the plates at the end. With the prevented leakage. The turbocharger consists of the central figure flow blower drive and the exhaust gauge of the turbine. Both blower and turbine is mounted with a common rotor with the shaft separated with the water turtle diagram. The exhaust gauges as conveyed into the multiple manifolds to the turbocharger casing is in the end of the engine is passing through the turbine. They are discharged for the atmosphere. The blowing casing out of the dividends the center line of the shaft into upper and lower halves of the casing is securely bolted. Otherwise, parts of the turbocharger housing one of the rotor shaft bearings and carried with the housing mounted in the blower casing, the impeller and the hose and suitably shaped the space of the blowing cut casing and the other outer rim impeller, the surrounding of the stationary blade with the diffuser auxiliary converging entrance passages surrounding the bearing housing. The air flows from the passenger impeller to the discharge from the impeller diffuser blades. The diffuser are shaped and decrease the velocity of the air and the same type of the increase the pressure of the air per discharge radially. Diffusers cooling collected the spiller chamber they delivered to the air manifold engine through the connecting of the pipe of the same engine filtered with the covered plates of the turbocharger. Alright, here's a cross-section of a blower, starting at 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock on the far left-hand corner all the way around clockwise. A generator drive sprocket with an oil metering ring, where there's oil pressure connection fitting in the bearings. It goes through the generator drive sprocket has 2 rotors with a bearing that hold on through the bearings, and they have 2 sets of different bearings, one for a rotor idealer gear and one for a rotor gear, driving a coupling, and one rotor ideal gear just for the oil pressure oil meter plunger. Here's a blower. It shows the blower housing, rotor gear, and front end of the end of the plate, rotor gear and rotor. As you can see, they have the rotor engines as in the front of the rotor draft gears. You see that the pushes the air bill to the side. Air intake filters in order to block off the outside of the air in the cold weather and advantages to the warm engine. The central portion of the turbocharger is made up of two castings with a dividing line in the horizontal shaft. At the center of the lower half of the is integral cast at the foot of the mounting and entire assembly on the foundation. Large opening in the on half of the provided connection to the exhaust stock. The exhaust side of the nozzle ring of the mounted with the exhaust casing serves the direct exhaust against the turbine blades. Proper angle of the turbine blades weight of the rim of the nozzle, the ring of the oil. Gas from the nozzle ring of the scores of the blade leaves the blade in the axial direction. The collection of the discharge chamber, the parts of the central portion that provided with the water-cooled walls with throughout. 3. The turbine consists of a forged steel one-piece shaft mounted in the bearings at each end of the air impeller and described in one of the one and fitted near the end of one of the shaft. The turbine rotor is larger than the integral flange near the other end of the shaft, in which the turbine and the blades are fitted with the locked and latching wire passes through the hole in each which blade of the silver of the desired place. The wire is made of the several lengths of the group of the 3, 4, 5 blades independently adjacent groups of the turbine nozzle ring and divided in the horizontal center lines as the flange of the exhaust inlet. The casing side of the in fits in the outboring intermediate casing. There is small clearance because between the flanges exhaust causes the two separate nozzles of the assembly, which is independently connected with the upper and lower exhaust manifolds, exhaust extending it into the passengers into the exhaust inlet casing in each. These are turbo in each nozzle with the 8 cast-in steel vines. We'll look at this page. Took back. You have your air inlet, your lube oil inlet, your lube oil drain. That goes through a gas outlet, goes through the turbine and goes through the air inlet with the gas inlet and the air outlet lubricating oil cooling system. Another picture of the cross section of the turbo starts at 1 on the very bottom right hand corner, headed upwards and around. Lube oil outlet, the turbine ending bearing, 3 lube oil inlet, 4 exhaust inlet casing, 5 exhaust inlet, 6 intermediate. 6 is intermediate casing, 7 turbine, 8 blower diffuser, 9 blower casing, 10 blower end bearing, 11 lube oil inlet, 12 lube oil outlet, 13 turbine nozzle ring, 14 rotary shaft, 15 air outlet, and 16 blower impeller. Nozzle ports that are aid casting in steel vanes, we just read that. The exhaust inlet casing is provided with the suitable passage for the conducting of the exhaust gases for the manifold, the nozzle ring, and for the nozzle ring and made the cast iron and water jacketed assembly into the casing of the halves of the bolted together with the horizontal center line, also the intermediate casing exhaust of the shaft and bearing carried by the housing mounted in the casing. The rotor is carried by the both ends of the sleeve bearings, the bearing at the turbine ends and combined with the supporting thrust of the bearings and fixing the axial position of the shaft. The bearing at the blower parts arranged with the allow free expansion of the shaft, and the journals are hardened steel sleeves which may readily be placed in labyrinth glands or be provided throughout the preventing combination of the gases and bearings and machine in the form of the bushing and the replacement of the sample matter. Lubricating of the oil and the engine lubrication oil pressure varies the engine speed. The pressure gauge connected to the turbocharger oil line installed in the cab should be observed periodically to check the normal operation. The cool is accomplished through the circulating engine water through the turbocharger casing of the sectional view of the turbocharger water inlet to the bottom of the intermediate casing from the discharge at the top. Water temperatures rise from the turbocharger should not exceed 30 degrees Fahrenheit. For engine ideal period for the cooling system prior to the shutdown. Also essential cooling of the turbocharger drain plugs located at the bottom of the casing. One of the cooling water system should be open whenever the engine cooling system is drained. The other plug is the turbine casing provides a means of draining the condensation of the rain of the turbine casing should be left open by the engine shutdown for the long period and shut down for a long period of time. Long period. The noise operated with the air rushing in the turbocharger is muffled by the intake cylinder. The silencer constructed out of baffles and sound deadened materials. Chapter 9, Electrical. Part 3, Electrical System. Chapter 9, Electrical Fundamentals.